Brown. Gordon Brown, thank you for joining me. It's been a while. The last time we spoke, I think Wraith Rovers were challenging for the Premiership. It's been a long time, Mr. Brown.
Look, they're still near the top of the Championship, and we still live in hope.
Well, good luck and best wishes to that. The world is at a turning point this weekend, you believe, Mr. Brown, in Rome. Why so?
Well, because none of us are safe anywhere until everybody's vaccinated everywhere. And you just need to look at the figures, Nick. The World Health Organization said this week that we have had 5 million deaths, and there will be another 5 million deaths if we don't vaccinate. They've said that there has been 245 million cases around the world, and there's going to be another 200 million. So people think here that we're near the end of this. We're actually possibly only just over halfway through this. And unless we get vaccines to the countries that don't have them at the moment, then the disease will spread. It will mutate. We may think it's not going to hit us, but it will come back in new variants, and it will hit even the fully vaccinated in Britain. So we've got to do something about vaccination for all, and that's why this weekend is really important, because we can distribute these vaccines that are available to all parts of the world. It's an issue of coordination. There will be 12 billion vaccines had been produced by the end of the year, enough to vaccinate the whole world, but we don't have them in the right places. And I'm calling on the countries that have the vaccines and don't use them, and that's after boosters, and it's after vaccinating the young people. You've got extra vaccines because you've over-ordered. Get them to the countries that need them. Let's get the world vaccinated and let's feel safe. Otherwise, these vaccines are going to be wasted. They're going to pass their expiry date. It's just criminal to see vaccines wasted when they could save lives.
So to clarify, some of my listeners will be thinking, why on earth does he want them to go to parts of Africa, Asia? I need to get vaccinated. I need granddad to get vaccinated. You're making it quite plain. Don't worry. You want the UK sorted before we move on.
I want the UK sorted. I appeal to everybody to get vaccinated because obviously it protects other people but also protects yourself. And I'm not saying you've got to make a choice between vaccinating in Britain and vaccinating the world. The success of manufacturing production is such that we're producing 1.5 billion vaccines in the world every month. It will soon be 2 billion. So there are enough vaccines, if we distribute them properly, to get to the places that need them. Unfortunately, we're hoarding them in some countries at the moment, and there's about 200 million vaccines that could be airlifted out tomorrow and save hundreds of thousands of lives.
OK, who's doing the hoarding in the UK, Mr. Brown?
Well, what's happening is in America, Britain, the European Union and Canada, there's probably about 240 million vaccines that are either lying in warehouses or about to arrive in delivery contracts. And so we are keeping these vaccines because we over-ordered and have been oversupplied, and we need to get them out. So in the UK, it's really the government that's got to say, look, we've counted up around the country the vaccines that are going to be needed. We know we've got an excess of perhaps about 10 million vaccines. We can get them out immediately. In the next few months, perhaps 50 million vaccines that Britain have ordered are going to come to us, but we don't need them because we already have enough to do the boosters, to vaccinate young people, and to have a little left over as a supply. And we know we can get more vaccines because vaccines are being produced at 2 billion a month by December.
So there's no block from so-called big pharma?
Look, there are issues about contracts that are going to be resolved. I mean, sometimes a contract may say, if you use the vaccine in this country, then this is the price. But if it goes to another country, we're going to charge you more. These are the sort of things that they've got to look at. But I've been talking to the manufacturers. I've been going through it with the manufacturers, and they are wanting this to happen. They know that it's a disaster for the industry if somehow we say everybody should be vaccinated. We set a target 40% by December, 75% by next year, and yet there's enough vaccines around and we don't make it. They need to show that they're getting the vaccine around the world.
So what does the British Prime Minister need to do in your view, Mr. Brown?
Well, you've got the G20 meeting of leaders in Rome on Sunday and Saturday, actually. I'm actually going to be talking to the finance ministers today. And what you need is to coordinate a plan and say, look, here's a timetable to get the vaccines we don't need out. Here's a delivery plan to airlift them or to get them some way to the countries that need them. We're going to make sure the countries that get them are able to use them. And I think that's an important point I'm making today, that we've got to help these countries get vaccination into the rural areas as well as the urban areas. But this can all be done. Look, we've had the magnificent success of discovering a vaccine, and it would be a tragic loss if we are hoarding vaccines in one country, denying them to other countries, and these deaths, 5 million possible deaths next year, actually start to occur, that would be a tragedy of immense proportion. That's why I say it's one of the great public policy failures of our time not to get the vaccines to everybody who needs them.
You have a very powerful piece in today's Daily Mail, Mr. Brown. A couple of figures jump out, one of which you've already referred to, 5 million expected to die. Also, next year's cases, 142 million. Is it fair to say, if action isn't taken in Rome this weekend, the figure is going to soar by a truly grotesque amount?
Well, 140 million is the figure for the low and middle income countries that are not vaccinated. So it's 200 million in total of new cases next year, unless we get the vaccines spread as much as possible. We now know the difference between life and death, the difference between protection and lack of protection is the vaccination. You need testing as well, and we may come to that, but the vaccinations have got to get to people. Now, I believe that it's in our interest, our security interest, to prevent these diseases mutating, new variants coming back to haunt us. China's already having to close down because it's got the Delta variant now. Other variants could easily come out of Africa, as you know, and then we're back to square one if we don't actually get this sorted. The quicker we get everybody vaccinated, the better.
When the meeting concludes this weekend, how will you determine that you, and I have to say there are many co-signatories to your letter, to your plea, if it is, how will you determine whether you've had success?
Well, I'm only one of about 170 former leaders and economists and so on who's saying in the Financial Times today, look, act today. The success will be that we agree to coordinate our activities. You see, Britain controls its supply of vaccines. America controls its own supply of vaccines. Canada does. The EU does. You've got to get together and say, how can we timetable the delivery of these surplus vaccines? So I'll be looking for an agreement to coordinate activities, maybe a task force that someone heads, just to bring everybody together so that we get these vaccines out. And I'll be looking for a statement that we're going to prepare for pandemics better in the future. I mean, there is a proposal to have a board to prepare and prevent pandemics, and there is some resistance from some countries. But look, it's in everybody's interest that we don't leave ourselves as unprepared as we were for the last pandemic.
You feel it so keenly. I can hear it in your voice. I can read it in this newspaper article.
Yeah, I just want to persuade people in Britain that it's in all our interests that everybody is vaccinated. We know that it's good for everybody to be vaccinated in Britain, but we've got to watch that the disease doesn't spread back to Britain from other countries as well.
All right. Just last couple of moments I have with you. Obviously, you'll be expecting me to ask a question. It's just a couple of days ago that we heard the budget from the current Chancellor, former Chancellor, former Prime Minister. How many marks out of 10 for Rishi Sunak?
Well, look, you've got to look at...
I love that throaty chuckle, Mr.
You've
Brown.
got to look at a budget, as I found. I did, I think, 11 of these. And you've got to look at a budget 2 days on. What people are saying 2 days on, and I think what people are saying is living standards are going to fall. There is no plan for growth. So it's not really the budget that I think is the budget for the future. And what's going to happen is that we are going to get only 1% growth by 2024. Now, that's an appalling level of growth, which means that living standards will fall, but they may not rise again if we can't get the growth. So we need a growth plan. And Sunak, the Chancellor, thinks that he can make a choice and can have both tax cuts later and public spending rises now. If you don't have growth, you actually have neither of these things. So I think he hasn't looked to the future. I think it's been very short-termist, and I think we really have to think, how are we as a British economy going to grow faster? Use our medical expertise, our expertise in IT, in science, in technology, renewable industries and everything else, and create a far stronger economy. That's the key to the future.
As an expert in this field, how do you stimulate growth, Mr. Brown?
You invest, you encourage innovation. You get those industries that are moving well to expand. You do the training so you don't leave yourself short of workers, and we haven't done that properly over these last 10 years. So it's innovation, investment, training skills, and then you've got high value-added production, and you've got good jobs where people are paid well because you're in the right industries of the future and you're in the competitive industries where you can beat the world. I want a growth plan for Britain, and I want good jobs, high value-added jobs, good paying jobs for the future, and I don't think we're there yet. I think the Chancellor's got to do a bit more thinking on this.
I know I've got only a last minute with you. Just quickly, I've got to ask you, the concerns about inflation. Where do you stand on the rise of inflation, what the Bank of England should do, and how it could presumably torpedo Mr. Sunak's plans?
Well, there's two questions. Is inflation going to be high? Yes, I think it's going to get to 4 to 5%, as has been predicted. So that is a problem because living standards then fall. and interest rates could rise and therefore mortgage rates rise. Is it a long-term problem? I think we've yet to see. What's going to happen to the prices coming out of China? Is that going to push inflation up or down? What's going to happen to services, the cost of services, health, education, all these things? The long-term future, you've got to look at all these factors before you can judge what's going to happen in the long term. I hope this is a temporary burst of inflation, but undoubtedly the big issue that the Chancellor ignored is that living standards for vast numbers of people, particularly people in low and middle income jobs, they're going to fall over the next year, and that's something that was glossed over in the budget.
So for my listeners, with the wealth of figures that come pouring out every day, what do they listen to, Gordon Brown? Do they listen to the inflation figures? Do they listen to the growth figure? Do they listen to the Bank of England? Where's the key voice?
I think people see it when they go shopping in the cost of food. I think they see it when they get their energy bills for gas and electricity. And I think people know perfectly well that when the Chancellor cut £20 a week out of poor people's budgets, he was making them have to choose between their heating and their eating and everything else. And living standards, I'm afraid, are going to be the big issue over the next few months because, unfortunately, for so many people coming up to Christmas, and it's really sad, they'll not be able to pay for what their kids want for Christmas presents. They'll not be able to pay for the Christmas meals and entertainments they want. And it's something that I think the Chancellor should be taking into account. He should not have allowed energy prices to be such a burden on people's living standards.
I expect a fairly robust response to my final question. Here we go. Has this budget levelled up the United Kingdom, Mr. Brown?
I wish it had, because, look, when we talk about levelling up, let's be clear, it's about equality of opportunity for all parts of the United Kingdom and all people. Now, if you cut £20 out of 6 million people's budgets in 1 week at a stroke, you're not levelling up, you're levelling down. People's living standards, again, here are falling. So all the rhetoric has got to be balanced against what's really happening in people's lives. And I see it every day in my own former constituency where I still live. And I talk to people, the charities, the food banks are being besieged because the cuts in the benefits. And of course, lots of charities and all the mental health pressures and everything else. We really ought to think about what's happening in people's lives.
Golly. Mr. Sunak's not up to the job listening to you, Mr. Brown.
I'm not saying it. I'm not wanting to make...
He's not in the first 11 for Wraith Rovers.
No, Nick, look, I don't want to attack or to criticise people individually, but I've got to think about what's the future of our country. And we need to grow, and we can't have 1% growth. That's going to mean living standards just don't rise. It's just not good enough.
Thanks for your time, and good luck with your effort and your mission to try and get those vital jabs, because we're not safe, Mr. Brown, until the whole world's safe. Is that true?
Exactly, and thanks for putting it that way so eloquently. Thank you.
Gordon Brown speaking with me earlier. Save the world, stop hoarding the jabs. Your views on that. Coming up after the 7:18, after that extended interview with Gordon Brown. 7:18 LBC News Headlines to Simon Conway.
The French ambassador to Britain will meet officials at the Foreign